All right, let's talk about the Republic, Book 7, which is otherwise known as the Myth of the Cave or the Allegory of the Cave. Either one. I was taught Myth of the Cave, but Allegory of the Cave. Probably Plato's most famous writing, possibly, except for maybe what he wrote about Atlantis, but certainly if you've been exposed to Plato at all, it's probably this myth. So at the beginning of this chapter, book means chapter, in case you didn't notice, book 7, chapter 7 of the Republic. Plato, or Socrates, the character, describes this crazy kind of situation. It's a myth, okay? It's an allegory. And in this situation, we have a bunch of prisoners that are tied up and chained up and facing a cave wall. They can't move at all, like not even look at each other. And behind them is a big fire. And between the fire and them, the roadway thing here on the picture, is kind of like this place where people parade different objects and things back and forth that casts a shadow on the cave wall. And these prisoners have been in this situation their entire lives. All they know is the shadows on the cave wall that's being cast by these things being paraded back and forth on the roadway. Who are the prisoners in the cave? All of us. Okay, everyone is. So this, and I guess this is kind of the allure, the draw of this myth, because what it signifies is that we really do not know the true nature of reality. We are only seeing the shadows on the cave wall. We don't really see what reality is really like. All right, to continue the story here though. Okay, so suppose one of the prisoners gets free of their chains and is able to get up and start looking around. First, he'd be blinded by the fire, and he'd take a little bit of time to adjust and for all this to sink in what's going on here. And when he sees what's really happening here in this cave. And then after a while, maybe he'll be able to make his way out of the cave, ascent to the sunlight. So out of the cave up into the real world and see the real reality of things. Okay, so he manages to get out of the cave and discover true reality. And the last thing he's going to see is the sun, which is, for Plato, the good. It's the highest thing. It's the last thing you discover. Again, going out in the sunlight, he's going to be blind. It's going to take him a while to adjust. I mean, this is kind of meant to be like enlightenment, like almost literally in this instance, right? Enlightenment. So the person actually learns the true nature of reality. And then, the person, who is the person? The philosopher. Actually not Socrates in this case, it's the guardians, which are the philosophers in the wider context of the Republic. But anyway, it's the philosophers. The philosopher gets out, he sees the nature of true reality, then he wants to go back in. And here there is a allusion again to Socrates in his trial. He goes back in the cave, he fumbles around in the dark, he finally finds his way back to the place he was. He sits down and he tries to explain to the other prisoners what's really happening, what the real nature of reality is. And they think he's out of his freaking mind, and they may even get mad. He says, angry at him and kill him for spouting this nonsense and being disruptive and such. So again, another allusion to Socrates' trial. I told you it's almost in every single dialogue. All right, so this is the gist of the cave myth. Um, pause for one moment here and change screens. All right, so that's the puppet show in the cave and all that. Now, a lot of people use this metaphor for all sorts of different purposes, and read all, you can read all kinds of different things into this myth. But it's important for this class, please. This is important for this class, that you understand that Plato has something very specific in mind here when he's doing this. This is Plato's metaphysics. We've been talking about his epistemology, theory of knowledge. Now we're going to talk about Plato's metaphysics, his theory of reality. Metaphysics is his theory of reality. And he has something specific to say about this. And this has to do with the theory of forms. Outside of the cave is what he calls the intelligible region, and that's as opposed to the sensible region, which is inside the cave. Now, it's called the sensible region is because that's what we sense with our eyes and ears and such. The intelligible region outside the cave is what we sense with our minds. And that is the true reality that we discover when we leave the cave, which the term regions is misleading. I got to say this, okay? Because it sounds like you're going into a different place, but it's not a different place. It's the intelligible region is the region of ideas. It's in your mind, okay? It's your thoughts. It's ideas. Plato is an idealist. In the metaphysical sense of idealist, that means ideas are more real than things. I know. He's not the only one that thinks this. There are other idealists, but ideas are more real than things, and forms are ideas, and that's what you discover outside of the cave. Inside the cave is a pale, shadowy imitation of this ideal world of forms. Now, forms are ideas, okay? They're ideas. So you're not going to see one or taste one or something. They're ideas. And they're ideals. So they're perfect ideas. Another cautionary thing, when you say that they're ideas, automatically people dive in, jump to the conclusion that, oh, they must be something that human beings create. Plato does not believe that the forms are created by human beings. They exist apart from human beings. We can discover them. How? By dialectic, by reasoning. We can find these ideal forms through our thoughts, but they exist without us. I think a really good example of this, and probably one that Plato definitely had in mind, I think, is like a perfect circle. Okay, so in the world, there is no perfect circle. Any circle you see in the world around you, if you look around, you look at your watch or something, there's circles everywhere. Nothing is mathematically a perfect circle in the real world. It's an ideal. Or even a line. A line has no width. There's no such thing as that in the real world. It's an ideal. But every circle kind of mimics the perfect circle. Every line mimics the perfect line. And Plato thinks this is true of everything. Every tree mimics the perfect tree. And it is a tree because it's drawing upon, partaking, he says, of that perfect form. It is a tree because it's drawing from and taking from that perfect form, which is the real thing. That's what's more real. The perfect tree, the perfect human, the perfect dog, everything. Everything has this perfect form that is this kind of ideal that is the true reality of things. And all of the mundane things that we see and touch are just imitations of that perfect form, okay? Remember, it's an idea, but it's not a human idea. It exists out there somewhere in the intelligible region of ideas. Okay, they are forms are general types. Okay, this is something to note. So every tree is a tree because it's drawing on the form of treeness. Every human is a human because we're drawing on the form of humanness. Every circle is a circle because it's drawing upon that form of perfect circle. You know, everything is what it is because it's partaking, as he says, from this perfect form. That form is the real thing, and all the other things are copies, imitations of that. I know this is kind of a wild theory. Okay. Yeah. That said, I want to speak about the notion of generality for a moment because it is something that Plato really brings out here. Generality is a very interesting philosophical issue because how does generality happen? Okay, so all trees are trees. Did we decide that all trees are trees? Did human beings look around and say, we're going to call those trees? So we made the decision that trees are trees. That's general type of thing. Or are trees trees? And we just noticed that they're trees. In other words, does the generality actually exist out there in nature and reality in the world? Or do we decide how to group things into general types of things? This is less controversial when it comes to man-made things like maybe a car or something, because we make them, so probably we decide what's a car. But trees or dogs or humans or something, not so clear. Are they real by nature? Maybe we'll call natural kinds is the term. Are natural kinds, do they really exist out there, or do we divide the world up into these different types of things? This is actually a pretty big issue because if we do divide the world up into different kinds of things, it's not like we're completely creating our own reality, but kind of a little bit, right? It goes in that direction, like we're kind of deciding what reality is, as opposed to if it's really like that, and we're noticing that it's really like that. Also, by the way, I should note, if every generality is essential, because if everything was just different from everything else, you couldn't think. Think about it. Every single thing you encounter in the world is just different from everything else. You'd be constantly confused. You wouldn't be able to think at all. You have to be able to generalize to even put your thoughts together. It'd be chaos. So it's an important it's an important thing that we're able to do. And how does it work? For Plato, definitely the general types called universals, by the way. Universals, the general types of things, are out there. They already exist. We discover them. There have been other philosophers that argue otherwise. Now, I also want to point to the fact that this does speak to okay, remember Parmenides and Heraclitus, and the universe never changes, and the universe is constantly changing. You never step in the same river twice thing. This is how Plato kind of deals with that issue. And he pretty much sides with Parmenides, because the true reality is the forms, and they never change. They're about being and essence, and they never change ever in the world. Whereas the world in the shadows, the world of our sensible experience, our material world, is constantly changing. But that's only a shadow of the form world, right? So Genesis, constant change, becoming, constantly changing. But the true world is the world of the forms. It's kind of interesting how this all fits in with the general idea of the Republic. I'm not going to go into elaborate too much on this. I'll just give you the general idea. So Plato's general idea of the Republic remember, he doesn't like democracy. What does he want? This is kind of his political ideology. He proposes that this group of people called the Guardians rule. And the Guardians are a group of people that have gone through an incredibly long education, okay? And he lays that out in a lot of detail. Like, first you learn this, then this, then this, and there's all these tests. And can you move on if you can't move on, then you're just going to be a farmer. Or if you can't move on, then you're just going to be a soldier. But if you pass all the tests and achieve the greatest amount of learning possible, then you're a guardian. This is what people call Plato's theory of philosopher kings. And I just want to note a couple of things about, and that's who he's talking about really when he's talking about who gets out of the cave. Let me see. First of all, I don't like the term philosopher kings at all, because it doesn't really explain what they actually are. The guardians have to be trained as soldiers before they can even get to be trained as philosophers. So it's very misleading to call them philosopher kings when it's not just philosophy. They have to know basically everything. I mean, it's like the super well-rounded person that's learned everything there is to learn, including being a soldier. So it's misleading to say they're philosophers. They're like the most educated people in the society. That's one thing. The other thing is calling them kings and there is a group of them. It's not one person, kings, plural, but it's not just kings. It's queens, because women can be guardians too, which is, by the way, pretty progressive for his time period. I mean, the role of women in Greek society at this time was not, women didn't get to vote, for instance. But he thinks that women can be guardians too. And there's this class of the most educated people in society should rule. Very often criticized as being elitist, and it is. But on the other hand, if you look around the world at who does rule places, there are exceptions, certainly. But I mean, really, if you look around the world, it is usually the most educated people that rule. Hey, simply a fact of the matter. I mean, the most educated people tend to rule, even in the United States. Like I said, that's not always the case, but it is generally the case. Okay, so theory of the forms, the general idea of the guardians, perhaps one more thing.